Welcome to Ravens Across the Pond, your place for everything Baltimore Ravens. From a fresh, European perspective. Plenty of laughs, plenty of piss-taking, and of course, questionable insights. Sit back, relax, grab a beer, and enjoy the show.
Welcome back, Ravens flock, to another episode of Ravens Across the Pond. If you're watching on YouTube or X, make sure you hit the like and follow button. You'll see joining me tonight is Nathan. How are we, Nathan?
Very good. How are you?
I'm not bad, mate. I'm not bad. And you will see another very special guest. We've got 3 guests on this week, back to back to back. We're going for the 3-piece. We're doing the Chicago Bulls in the 90s. Ken McKusick, welcome back to the show. Thank you very much for joining us.
How you doing?
I'm not bad, Ken. I'm not bad. How's things for you? What's Baltimore being like?
Life's good. We're struggling with the Orioles right now, but the early Ravens stuff is very good. The re-signing of Calais Campbell is a big move for the team. We're excited about, and I think we're positive on the Ravens right now.
Yeah, excellent. As I say, the last time that you were on the show, Ken, just before we came on air, there'd been a head coaching change. So we had to talk about that. Obviously, the Rio game, we've got that to look forward to coming up. But in between then, there was obviously the Max Crosby drama that went on. 2 first-round picks, and then obviously that trade never happened for reasons that we've been told, injury concerns over the knee. And then the Ravens go into this draft with clear and obvious needs. It feels like coming out of that draft, they certainly addressed them, especially in the first round, taking Diego Ione with the first pick, with the 14th pick in the first round. Ken, first and foremost, your reaction to that pick, and then the reaction to the rest of the Ravens draft, and how would you grade it?
Okay, so I don't know how much time I have to this, but I'd like to kind of do a little run-up to pick number 14, if you don't mind, to just talk about that for a second. So absolutely, we were actually sweating pretty significantly on our pod or our stream about what was about to happen, as the Ravens got to pick 11, or the draft got to pick 11, and the Ravens weren't sure to get any of their 3 big options at that point, who were Ruben Bain, Kenyon Sadiq, and Venga Ioane. And they weren't sure to get any because 11, 12, and 13 were still to be picked. Then Dallas traded up. They took Caleb Downs, which was like a big relief because at least we're going to get one of those 3 players. And there was difference of opinion on who they should take. A lot of people on the air, including Gordon McGuinness, really wanted Bain. In fact, he wanted the Ravens to trade up and get Bain, which I'm going to tease him about relentlessly for the rest of his life now because it happened anyway. Then at pick 12, Miami takes Caden Proctor, which is one of the really big surprise picks of the draft. And I know they need an offensive lineman and whatnot, but Proctor is a guy who might move into guard. Maybe he can play tackle at some point. Enormous human being, not a guy the Ravens would have been real excited to get. And then in number 13, the Rams had the pick, and the danger is still there that the Ravens don't get the player they want. If somebody jumps the Ravens to select, the player they want at number 13, and we're just hoping that all 3 of those players make it through. And sure enough, the Rams draft Ty Simpson, a quarterback, a very unexpected pick, and a pick that I struggle to even understand. I think if the Rams wanted to trade back there, they could have gotten Simpson. They probably were concerned with the Jets. There's a possibility, but let's say they ended up getting Kenyon Sadiq instead. How terrible would that have been for them if they traded down and ended up getting him? So a weird situation. Anyway, the Ravens on the clock then. I was probably very slightly in favor of Sadiq at the time, although my feeling about the draft after it worked out is that by drafting Ioane, they opened up the rest of the draft for themselves. So I thought that was a positive thing. And, they end up drafting Ioane, of course, and everybody's happy, this is not a Patrick Queen and a Xavier McKinney situation where I absolutely hated the Patrick Queen pick and really wanted them to have Xavier McKinney. This was like, 50 Shades of Grey. We're somewhere in the middle in terms of whether I'd rather have Ioane who there's some significant second contract risk for, and Sadiq, who you can keep as a Raven for 10 years because of the mechanics of the 5th-year option and the salary cap implications of him later on. I'll get into that more if you want, but much more likelihood that a player like Kenyon Sadiq ends up being in the Ravens Ring of Honor than Ioane. So anyway, and then Ruben Bain, we liked him. I thought, he had problems that obviously had blacked out at him for a lot of teams at that point, meaning they off their boards. And Gordon liked him more than I did, but we all had our favorites on the show. In the second round, though, was interesting. Everybody, 100% of the panel thought that Young was the best available pick at number 45, which has never happened before. Anyway, exciting. I thought, good draft overall. Yeah. The top 2 picks are what really made it.
Yeah. What does you say that with the pick in the second round? And did you have at any point the Ravens were going to go 2 wide receivers in this draft, especially early on? And also, I think one of the comments from when we were chatting in the community today about you coming on the show, I think one of the questions was, does this now, the 2 wide receivers that are getting in, big, tall, athletic guys that can go up and win 50-50 balls, is that something that you feel that Lamar Jackson has been missing? And were you surprised that they went 2 wide receivers in this draft?
Okay, so last year they had DeAndre Hopkins, who provided exactly that. So he's an outside the numbers, I dare you to cover me in man, and I will adjust to the football and go get it. And he's the best. He's a best in show type player of that type. So they weren't missing it last year, and they have missed it in past years when they've had, generally speaking, some smaller, shiftier receivers, which I do tend to like. But it'll be interesting to see if Lane or Surratt, if either one of them force safety help on that side of the field. And honestly, I'm not even sure how Surratt will be used, whether he'll be a big slot or whether he'll be used in other ways. So the Ravens have some options in terms of how they do it. I think Lane is ideally and outside the numbers, use a substantial portion of the space budget with the X receiver guy. I think you try and get him singled up and you try and see if he can take the ball away from opponents. And one thing Lane's also been very good at, not been a great contested catch player in his career, but he's been a really good in a secondary measure of contested catches, which is the 18-3 touchdown to interception ratio, means that he keeps the ball away well defensively from the defender.
Yeah. With I guess with Jesse Minter coming in, there was a lot of kind of focus on how the defense would kind of turn around to that. But how important has it been to get Declan Doyle a lot of kind of new faces in, a lot of help to, I guess, give him the tools he needs to really put some kind of entertaining football out on the pitch. Obviously, we've got some help now for Lamar, but yeah, getting those 2 receivers in. Obviously, we've added a bit of tight end help now. How important is that going to be for Declan, kind of what he wants to do with the team?
I guess let's start with the coaching staff in general. I'm very, very positive on the coaching moves that they made this offseason. I kind of actually lukewarm on getting rid of Harbaugh. I think there's always risk of something like that, but the time had probably come after this last season. And for them to, it's not just the fact that they got Minter, who I think is going to be very good and is very good at commanding the defense, but they got Ledford. They got Anthony Weaver as a defensive coordinator. If you've ever seen Weaver on the field with the Ravens in practice, you just realize what a leader of men he is in terms of being able to coach defensive line and show technique, but also he's a very tough guy, and he'll sit there and he'll do the rip drills, where the defensive lineman will go up to remove the arm of the alleged offensive lineman. He's the offensive lineman in this case, and he takes a lot of physical abuse from that. Now, talking about Doyle, they got so much sprinkled talent on this coaching staff. Eddie Faulkner, I think, will be a really good running backs coach. He preaches missed tackles. Doyle himself, I have no idea how he's going to exactly run this offense. We've had pods on that talking about where do you use the half snap per play effectively that Patrick Ricard was taking. Patrick Ricard played roughly 50% of the snaps, maybe a little bit less this last year, but anyway, roughly 50%. And you have 5 eligible receivers per play. So it's half an extra eligible receiver you pick up. And there's a lot of different ways to deploy that. It could be an extra receiver. It could be an extra tight end. It could be a pony backfield. You could do multiple things. It's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. And I don't think we'll really know, not until the regular season begins. So this is a really fun time to be an analyst of the Ravens and look at, what are they really scheming to do as we go through camp and as we see those first games unfold.
Touching on obviously what you've said there about Declan Doyle coming in as offensive coordinator, and obviously the I believe a huge wealth of talent now in the coaching in the coaching department at the Ravens. Declan Doyle, Anthony Weaver, Anthony Devine Senior, just to name three of them. Marcus Brady, pass game coordinator, Randy Brown, senior special teams coach, Harlan Bauer, outside linebackers coach, just to name a few of them. Which one of those coordinators do you feel is going to have the biggest kind of stamp on this team this season?
The two, I'll pick one on offense, one on defense. The offensive one is clearly Ledford. Is how can Ledford get the offensive line turned around and be producing like past Ravens offensive lines had? The other coach, I think, is Mickens, and he's the longtime friend of Minter and a guy who coached the Notre Dame secondary for the last 5 or 6 seasons. I think since 2019, so it actually might have been 7 seasons. But whatever the case, however long it's been, absolutely sterling record of producing high quality defensive backs. And Notre Dame has a lot of recruiting access, but he's made them into outstanding players and in a lot of cases top draft picks. So that's really something special. He actually coached Kyle Hamilton, of course, there. I think those two, if I had to say, will have probably the biggest impact. But I mean, Nick Gill, this additional doctor they brought in from the All Blacks to preach and hopefully reduce injuries. He's a doctor. He's a physician himself. And the All Blacks have that reputation of a rugby team that gets stronger as the game goes on, or they become, are still strong at the end of the game. That's exactly what the Ravens need. So I'm very excited about a multitude of coaching hires.
We obviously, Jordan, rookie mini camp, you were there, you were able to see some bits and bobs. We had Cordell Woodland on the show yesterday, and I think he said that had to be restricted to, 40 minutes, whereas last years previous, it was pretty much a full practice. From that short, kind of, extremely short time that you spent there the other day, what stood out for you? And was there anything run differently from years previous?
Right. So I could tell you in a general sense of how practice was run, but I can't tell you anything specific or schematic about things. But here's what I would say. I think this was the most significant thing to me is I watched, they did calisthenics, then they did run drills, then they did calisthenics again. So you can tell we're not getting a lot. They did some individual position drills. I'll talk about that a little bit. But the run drills, they had 11 on 11 or 9 on 9 on the field, one or the other. And of the players on the field, only 3 of them were even wearing helmets, 2 inside backers and the quarterback. So you're not, it's not a full speed, beat the crap out of the other players, padded practice of any sort. It's just a tryout, see how people move around, see how people get out of their stances and whatnot. But the one thing I was noticing from the defense is they were very loud and they were constantly talking and communicating to each other, which I thought is an extremely good sign. And if you think about it, when you have a new job, and these guys are all rookies and first-year players coming back after spending the entire year on the practice squad. If you're at that point in your career, you tend to say less, I think, in terms of what's going on. You don't tend to come in and be a guy who knows everything and tells everybody what to do. I think that's a losing strategy. But in this case, the coaches had them ready to go. They were talking about that. I asked Minter about this, and he was extremely positive about the fact that they had been so loud and so communicative pre-snap. And there's a long quote out there that's on the Ravens website, or that is probably available on video as well if you want to hear Jesse talking about it. That's, I think, is very well done and really gives you a sense of how much he liked that. Other than that, you saw the quarterbacks didn't look like anything special to me, neither Pavia nor Fagnano. They're both guys who move pretty well. Fagnano throws a pretty hard, tight spiral. Pavia is more of a wobbly guy, although there is velocity on his ball. And then I saw a little bit of Lane and Surratt in individual position drills. It's close up, which was nice. Lane definitely lives up to the natural leaper, goes high for the ball, spears it. You can see how he would keep it away from defenders. Surratt, the thing that's nice to see about him is that he gets very low in his breaks. So even though they're running around traffic cones to do their patterns and, there's not players there, you can see how he gets low and has a very efficient movement that goes with that. So I think he'll still be slippery at the NFL level. Certainly that was a plus for him playing in Indiana.
Yeah, just going back to the Jesse Minter one, I think he said he wants his unit to be the loudest, most crazy, obnoxious unit in all of football, which is just, I think, sums up of his personality and what he's gonna bring to the field. In terms of some of the undrafted free agent guys that I kind of wanted to get just a quick idea on, especially to those who might not have kind of read up on them. There were 19 of them. I'm not going to spend too much time on Pavia because I think enough people have probably talked about him, and I think he's probably just a camp body and maybe an unpopular one. But the three guys I want to talk about are Lardarius Webb Jr., a name that a lot of Ravens fans should be familiar with, and then two guys on the offensive line, Diego Pounds and Nick Dawkins, who I think those two guys for me look like two people that excel kind of in the pass protection side of things, but maybe kind of their struggles in college were more kind of on the run side. So what you kind of think about those two, and let's talk a bit about Lardarius Webb. Is it a bit of nepotism? Is it a favor brought in for a camp hire, or do you see him actually getting maybe some use in the slot?
I don't really think there's a high probability that Lardarius Webb will be playing in the slot for the Ravens this year, or maybe even next year or the year after. But it's probably a little bit of a favor. They have some of those. They do. One player who stood out, who was a family member, was Kadir Ishmael as a tight end. So he showed up at camp. He looked great. This was, I guess it was 2 years ago, right? Because last year he played for the Raiders. So I guess it was 24 that he was there, and he was really knocking some guys on their rear end. I mean, some of the he had kind of a what is it? A rivalry? That's not the right word. He had some bad blood going between him and the outside linebackers from doing some excessive blocking. So whatever Lardarius Webb brings to the field, I'm going to be excited to see it. His father was one of the great Ravens of all time, my favorite Ravens cornerback of all time. I have his jersey sitting right behind me in this room here, and he's a great favorite of mine. I know very little about him as a player, and nor would I, given context, be able to project that forward to the NFL level. So the other two, you asked about the two offensive linemen. Nick Dawkins is one additional possibility in many below-the-line possibilities that the Ravens now have at center. So I think he'll get an actual look. They have Corey Bullock, who I think should be the number one, but he might not be. They signed Danny Pinter. I always get his name wrong, but it doesn't matter. He signed him. They gave him a little bit of guaranteed money, so he's likely to be around. Maybe a backup, maybe the starter. I don't think it's a good answer if he's a starter because he's 30 years old and he's played less than 1,000 career snaps. They have Gwynn, who Ledford brought with him from Atlanta, who might get a shot. And they're talking about Emory Jones taking snaps at center. So that might be something we see. I think all options are on the table, and Nick Dawkins is one of them. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they split up that time with the number ones as camp moves forward. And I'm sure that's something that all summer I'm going to be looking at and reporting on. So that'll be fun. And then Diego Pounds was the other guy. And a guy who has a legitimate college record. He's a guy that I looked at in the offensive tackle group, and I had him about 19th or 20th on my list of offensive tackles. So he's on a guy like that. If you can get him as an undrafted free agent, fantastic. He's got the right size and shape at I think he's about 6'6", 325, and he's got fairly long arms. That's a great place to start. Let's see what he can actually do in camp. Probably the best spot for him is going to be on the practice squad. And then there is some poaching risk with him, but UDFA's got to start somewhere, and I think they have some good possibilities.
Do you envisage? Do you believe that the issue the Ravens have got at the moment about who is going to play centre? Do you think that is going to be resolved with somebody off this current roster, or do you see maybe the Ravens bringing somebody in? Obviously, when teams start cutting people, or do you think that they'll trust the process of what they've got at the moment?
Okay, so Eric DeCosta talked about it, and always watch actions, not words. But when Eric DeCosta talked about it, he said, maybe we can address that by trade. I think if they go to the market, they're going to find that the cost is prohibitive trade-wise, that it's going to be more than they really want to spend. I think they're more likely to try and solve the problem either in-house or with a creative guard to center conversion from the free agent market. So one name that keeps coming up is, could Kevin Zeitler play center? And I think the answer is probably yes. But he's been a guard his entire career, and it wouldn't necessarily make sense to move him. On the other hand, big guy, has more size than you could hope for normally at center, and a very experienced offensive lineman who can make the calls certainly by himself, and hopefully can snap the football as well. So I think there are options. I don't think it's necessarily just the guys that are in house, but the trade market specifically, I'm skeptical that DeCosta is going to find the value he wants there, particularly considering what the Linderbaum contract just ended up being. I mean, that's so outrageous, and driven by a combination of retirements at center and a very foolish couple of bidders in the market who let it go that way.
Ken, we've got just a couple of questions before we move on. Danny says, which new piece to the offense do you think will earn the trust of Lamar first? We all know Lamar needs the trust in his receivers, and losing likely. We have lost a trusted piece on and off schedule.
Yeah, great question. I think there are so there's four guys. I guess it could be. It could be Lane. It could be Surratt. It could be Cuevas, or it could be Hibner. And I guess you could make a case for it being Adam Randall or somebody else otherwise who maybe gets surprise playing time. But I think those four would be the four to choose from. If I had to rank them in priority order, I'd say Hibner, Lane, Surratt, Cuevas would be the order I'd pick. I think Cuevas will be a good blocker, and he'll gain trust from that. I don't necessarily think that means he'll have the trust as a receiver, but that would be my most likely order of trust gaining. And
you mentioned Jacoby Lane, one of our New England Patriots fans who's a listener to this show is asked, does Ken see Jacoby Lane as a starter, or is he kind of sitting for a year and learn?
So shades of gray here. Jacoby Lane will play some snaps as a rookie, I'm pretty sure. Does he play the amount that Tez Walker did? I think it will be more than that as a rookie. Does he play the amount that Rashad Bateman does? I certainly hope not, because that probably means Bateman's career as a Raven is over. And Bateman is still a very talented player. He's under a very cheap contract, and at his best, he's been absolutely fantastic. So if we have 24 Bateman again, then I kind of hope that Lane sits the year. I think he's got Tez Walker, who deserves playing time, frankly, ahead of him in a lot of ways. Lane does bring something special, though, as a vertical threat who can get up and get the football. And if Doyle sees value there, there may be more 11 packages on the field that allow for him to be used. So if you want me to put a stake in the ground, if I over-undered it, I'd say that Lane plays maybe 22% of the snaps this year.
Who do you think it'll be? We had the constant red zone struggles last year. It was kind of well publicized. We know probably 99% of that is down to the offensive line. Who going into this year? Who do you think Lamar's primary target is going to be in that tight red zone situation there? In those situations where we've struggled so much last season.
Okay, so I think it'll still be Andrews, first of all, number one. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Whether or not Hibner gets some of those targets, I kind of doubt, because I don't think you play two flex guys on the same play. Cuevas could be a guy who gets some. Lane could be a guy who gets some. Bateman could be a guy who comes back and gets more. Zay Flowers is always a possibility. But one interesting thing was said, and that I think is contrary to the way the Ravens operate in the red zone, and contrary to the way Lamar wants to operate. Lane said his favorite pass was the fade. Now, if he's talking about a fade, going to the sideline from the numbers, deep down the left sideline, fine. And then that can fit in the Ravens offense. There's a place for that. If he's talking about a fade to the corner pylon, that doesn't really fit in the Ravens offense. Lamar Jackson's never really thrown the fade in his career. And he's been a guy who avoided interceptions he had like 57 touchdowns with no interceptions at one point in his career by being a guy who rolled left and right to find the direct line to a receiver. And you give your receivers a lot of time to break open late with that, and you have a good chance for success. I don't think they're going to all of a sudden start throwing, one fade a game or even 8 fades a season to try and utilize the size of Jacoby Lane. I just don't see that.
Nathan?
Yeah, I think one rookie that I think you maybe only touched on by name and not really much more as the owner's pick, allegedly, Mr. Adam Randall, a guy who's obviously swapped positions kind of throughout college and now projects to be either the 3rd or 4th running back on the roster, depending on how, I guess, Rasheen Ali develops over time. Is he someone that projects out to be more kind of a special teams guy this year? Or did you see him kind of being able to carve out maybe a slightly niche role for himself, given that he's kind of got both running ability and obviously what he can able to maybe throw a few more routes out there? It was one that's kind of I've been thinking about, and I don't know if you saw much maybe out of him during when you were out there having a watch.
Yeah. So in Randall's case, kind of reminds me of 2 Ravens. Obviously, he's very high cut, tall, physical, more upper body than lower body. It kind of reminds me of Derrick Henry in a lot of ways in that respect. Derrick Henry is probably more well proportioned, but he's very, very tall and a heavy upper body. If you look at his receiving, it was a very good move for him from wide receiver. He had been a very bad receiver, and by the way, this is something that I was really surprised by. You'd think he would have maybe had a role that was more like a tight end. He was like an outside receiver, basically 85% plus of the snaps, which is very unexpected in terms of going back and seeing that. So he's changed, and now his body is like a Derrick Henry, maybe like a Gus Edwards might be a more reasonable thing to also set expectations correct. In terms of why the Ravens got him, I think they need another bell cow running back. So they needed another guy who, if anything happens to Henry, they have a running back. Hill is not that guy, and I don't think Ali is that guy either. I think we'll see Ali returning kicks for sure, and I think that there's the likelihood is it'll be either Wester or Randall at the other spot who does it in terms of what his special teams role is. So we'll see him on both ways, and I certainly Randall is not going to be a guy who sits out special teams drills. He has to be in there in some form or another. I don't know if he'll be a return man or if he might be a gunner on punt team or what he might be doing, but he'll have roles on 4 units.
Were you going to say something then, Nate?
Yeah. And I was saying, moving on, I guess, from rookies to people that might be negatively impacted by rookies. Are there any Ravens probably currently should be kind of looking over their shoulder, possibly if they don't kind of put the reps in this offseason, they could see some of their playing time eaten into? I think just having a quick look at what the snap counts were looking like last year. I'm thinking about guys maybe like Atavius Robinson, Tez Walker, or even I guess someone on the line like John Jenkins. Looks like they're probably under a bit of a threat now.
Okay, so early down guys I don't think are in that much jeopardy. So guys who are in that much jeopardy are Andrew Voorhees is in a lot of jeopardy because he got a pay escalator that makes it attractive for the Ravens to cut him. The Ravens have already signaled that he's not going to be a starter. I don't really think they want to pay this kind of money if he's not going to be starting. So my guess is he's at risk, and we'll see how Ledford works with him and if that comes to fruition, if that comes to an end there. Broderick Washington is a guy who almost certainly is going to be cut. Is $4 million of savings for cutting him. So even though there might be use for him, I think that he's a guy who's probably gone. In terms of Tavius or Young, I don't think either of those guys are going to have any problem getting snaps. So Tavius played a lot of snaps last year. The Ravens know how valuable he is. He's a guy who can kick inside. He can play early down run snaps. I think he's going to get a lot of time at both. And I think we'll see Young have a fair amount as well, too, as a rookie, where he plays probably on the Sam side, or maybe he probably plays on the rush side, would be my guess. So be opposite a uncovered or naked left tackle and trying to cave him in on early downs. And then he probably kicks inside as well on third down. I think that makes all kinds of sense. Now, the wild card in here is that they're going to have to move Tavius to Sam linebacker for this, which will add coverage responsibilities for tight ends. And that could be a little challenging for him. But hey, he's a guy who has played well, and I think he's I don't think he's in any danger of losing a big batch of snap count. Mike Green will play less, by the way, but hopefully that'll be a good less, that he'll be playing much more as a situational pass rusher. And otherwise, I'm trying to think of who might be really in line to lose snaps. Cornerback, I think it all comes down to injury, so I won't even get into that. Tez Walker, is maybe a little bit on the bubble for some playing time. Whether he gets it over Lane, over Surratt, with the rookies, there's a value to getting them started earlier. So you try and do that, to manage your roster as best you can. But in the case of Walker, I think he's already been such a big player. I think the Ravens want to take advantage of that. So I hope he doesn't really suffer a loss of playing time. So those would be some of the guys I'd hit on.
Just having a look at, obviously, defense and the defensive struggles last year. No, there's got to be a stark change coming into this season. It's impossible for it to be as bad as it was last year. A player that I was disappointed with last year, and there was a stark decline, and I'm willing to give it grace that scheme, that just the way the defense was ran and just how poor it was. But one who I think needs a big year, but I'm also fairly positive that we will see this from him, is Roquan Smith.
Oh, I was sure. That's why I flashed 44 there. I thought you were going to get a terrible year. Yeah. So,
do you envisage us seeing kind of the Roquan that we saw 2 seasons ago, this season under Jesse Minton?
He was a hell of a player last season. That's my position on the matter, is that, he played very well. He's a guy, he had couple of the greatest linebacker games in Ravens history during the season. But anyway, I think, it's a contract year effectively for him. I think he has everything on the line in terms of playing very well. And I think he won't have any problem. Humphrey is at a crossroads year in his career. I think it's a lot less sure what his future is. If he were to have another bad year at cornerback, and there were injury reasons for it, but there's also, just not a lot of explanation you can give from being the last ranked PFF cornerback in the entire league. That's just really bad. So he's, the Ravens are hoping he'll be back, but I think he's the bigger risk. Roquan, almost certainly this will be Roquan's last year in Baltimore, because there's a $20 million cap savings for cutting him in 2027. So I don't expect him to be back, but I do expect him to play well this year. Humphrey, I don't know what to expect. And I'm before they signed Jalen Hawkins, I was very much of the opinion that he should be moved to safety. And they can get value out of that. I didn't think they could get as good a player out of that. And then they got Hawkins, who I think is as good a player probably as Humphrey might be at safety. Humphrey's skills, extremely portable to safety. The off-man coverage skills, meaning he can get interceptions when it's not his coverage assignment. That's something that's extremely portable to safety. He's been generally a good tackler in his career, so I don't think he'd have a problem with that end of the game. And had some injuries last year. The situation was not ideal, but Humphrey is the guy I'm most concerned about, returning to form this year. And then, hey, the Ravens got to figure out if he fits in their plans in the future.
Yeah. What would you say the chances of Marlon Humphrey being a Raven post 26 are?
Okay.
As it stands at this moment.
Yeah, that's good. Put a stake in the ground. Let's put it at there are a few different avenues. That's a hard number. 32%. That'll be my over-under on it right now. If I had to make a wager and somebody said I'll take 11 to 10, and they want it or not, they give me those sort of odds, I'd probably accept it. But that would be the number.
Yeah. For you going into this season coming up, what are you most excited about? Me personally, I think all Ravens fans are excited about the severe possibility that old school Ravens defense is going to be back. That battle, guys. I mean, and when I say old school Ravens, I'm not just talking about defense there. I'm talking about guys that, in short down situations are going to step up and put the head up above the parapet and win those tackles, make those runs. I think just the last, there was just so much wrong with last year. But for me personally, I'm just so excited about to see what Jesse Minter and the defensive coordinator are going to do here with this Ravens defense.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that to be sure. And one of the things to look at in Minter's past is that he's really turned water into wine in terms of a lot of mediocre players having big years for him defensively. So that's something that I'm really excited to see if he can do that. And it's also been a hallmark of Ravens teams of the past is that they've gotten a lot out of role players on the defensive line at edge, at inside linebacker, undrafted free agents a lot of times, and safeties in particular, guys who could jump down and play dime back. Ozzie had a remarkable record of drafting safeties that could fill that bill. So, I'm very excited about that. And he's brought in a team around him that is just extraordinarily good on paper. We'll see how good they are at actually, managing the outcomes here. But Mickens is a tremendous track record, and Volker, a guy he's been with for a long time, who's at Navy, is I think going to be his eyes and ears in the booth. So defensively, Minter will be on the field because he has to be, because he's the head coach. And Anthony Weaver is on the field guy because he's a leader in that way. If you put Weaver on a headset, you're losing the value of Weaver. So they got to have a third guy who's their booth guy who oversees quality control in the defense, and that'll be Volker. And that he's a really interesting player for that. And then you have players like Mickens. I'm not sure where he'll be for the game. I'm not sure if he'll be on the field or be in the booth, but it could be either. And he'll split those duties with somebody else. So just where they sit is going to be interesting for, coming into this year, and how they, make lesser players into greater players is something that, we've loved with past Ravens defensive coordinators, and we got less of, I'd say, with Zach Orr.
Yeah. Looking at obviously the rest of the division, the AFC North. Obviously, we know that there's every team had their issues coming into this offseason. I think the Browns will just be the Browns. Who do you see being the Ravens' biggest threat for the North? Is it going to be Steelers? Is it going to? Do you think the Bengals with Joe Burrow this year, if he stays fit? Where do you see the battle for the AFC North going?
Yeah, I mean, a healthy Burrow along with their offense is going to be a challenge for the Ravens in most seasons. The Steelers have a lot of structural issues including some big contracts that they're kind of nearing the end with some older players. But I don't know who the Ravens are to talk anymore, having Calais Campbell, a 40-year-old that they're depending on for a tremendous amount of flexibility of this defense. So, I think, either of those teams could be there. The Browns actually are much improved. And I thought they probably had the best draft in the division, just looking top to bottom in terms of who they got. And it shouldn't be surprising because they had a ton of draft capital. But I thought in terms of the amount of talent that they acquired, they had a really outstanding draft. And that worries me, is that they might get the ship righted. Now, they still have an enormous amount of borrowing to work their way through, and they're still trying to figure out if they should make Deshaun Watson their number one quarterback again, which, if you're worrying about those kind of problems at this point, it's probably not the greatest situation there that you have.
Yeah. One question we asked Cordell last night, and we've got Kevin Oerstreicher on tomorrow. We kind of said, as a team, if it was on the pod, we'll ask a few of the same questions just to get a gauge of where everybody's at. We've got a habit here in the UK of being overly optimistic and making ridiculously early predictions. Like I'm envisioning England lifting the World Cup in New York at the end of July. So we asked Cordell last night for his Super Bowl matchup.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd love to see the Ravens in the Super Bowl. There's no team that I bet on. Most of the times, you ask me a question like, "What's the chance of the Ravens making the Super Bowl?" I could probably come up with a number, but it's going to be a number nobody's all that excited about. I think they have maybe a 20 to 22% chance to be the AFC representative in the Super Bowl. We should be excited about a year where we go in with that. They're above average chance certainly for the group as a whole, but there's some other good teams in the AFC. The Houston Texans look for real. I'd say the the Chiefs will be back. I think that the Bills, could still be good. I mean, 22% should sound pretty good to people, I think.
Yeah, I think you take them odds, wouldn't you, Nathan, at this point in the year?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I think also
I'm hearing him. Yeah.
Oh, I'm not hearing him. Sorry. I
was going to say I didn't even know how to put my microphone on mute. Yeah, with teams like the Pats as well knocking about, I think 22% is perfectly fair. I think first of all, just focus on winning the North and then moving on from there, because that's been giving us enough problems recently in the past. So yeah, punch your ticket to the dance and then do what we do best once we're there.
Hope this is not another injury-plagued year. Ravens, need to. One of the things that's built into, of the 78% of the chance of the Ravens not making the Super Bowl, a good 30% of that is Lamar gets hurt. And so that's what the Ravens really need to avoid is another injury to Lamar Jackson that ends up skewering the season. Please understand, I'm not blaming Lamar Jackson for getting hurt. It just happens, but they need to do what they can to avoid it. They need to do what they can to keep him healthy. And we had an interesting discussion about potentially reducing Lamar's playtime, which notionally I could get behind. I just don't know how do you do it practically. Other than the obvious things, you sit him out in a week 18 meaningless game, sure. Or week 17, everybody's going to agree to that. You take him out at the end of a 3-touchdown blowout in the fourth quarter, no problem. Everybody's going to be on board with that. The problem is, can you play a quarterback ever rotationally where you bring him out for a series in the first half and a series in the second half to reduce his injury risk? And I think that's where the thing kind of falls apart. But anyway, that's that podcast is out there if you want to on filmstudybaltimore.com or your favorite podcast platform.
Yeah, we'll get that plug. We'll give you a chance at the end as well
Sure.
to obviously plug yourself. One last question actually before we do finish up. Ken, Danny again asked, do you think there'll be? I think you kind of covered this before. Danny might have missed it. Do you think there'll be personnel changes on offense, losing 2 trusted tight ends, replacing with rookies? Does this show signs of more 11 personnel, giving Bateman a more expanded role?
I mean, I'd probably say more likely than not, Bateman will have an expanded role over what he had in 25, because what he had in 25 wasn't very much. And in 24, he's a very good player. And I don't know, set the Ravens record, by the way. A lot of people don't know this, but in 24, he set the Ravens record for yards per target by a wide receiver at 10.5. And he also set the Ravens record for touchdown percentage by a wide receiver at 1/8, 12.5%. So Bateman has a record of playing at a very high level, and I think they'd be foolish not to figure out how to unlock that again. And I think Doyle is probably as good a candidate as anyone to figure out how to do it. So yes, I'd expect an expanded role for him. In terms of how they deal with the additional half a eligible receiver per play, they've got a lot of ways to go. We could see more 12 and 13. Personnel. I think in a lot of ways that's a good thing to try, because you keep the other opposing defensive coordinator guessing when you do that. I think will we see more 11? Probably. Will we see 10? I really don't think we will. I think the Ravens will pretty much always have one tight end on the field. The other way they can address it is they can use pony backfield. So they could have some 2 running backfields. They did not do much of that, probably 12 snaps or something last year, the whole season, where they had 2 running backs in the backfield to make use of Keaton Mitchell and Derrick Henry at the same time. But maybe it's Adam Randall and Derrick Henry now, and they try and figure that out.
Yeah, Mark just said there, to me, the start pick feels like a move towards big slot. He's corrected there. It was basically what Willie Snead was playing, punching above his weight way back when Willie Snead was there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very possible that he ends up as a big slot. The Ravens already have a lot of big slot receivers in these tight ends, and both Hibner and Andrews, that's what they are. I mean, they're not inline guys, and if they are, it's a it's a secondary kind of a responsibility. It's secondary to where they really provide value to the team. So, I don't know how much we'll see, but I'm sure there'll be times where they play 11 personnel. They'll have 4 wide, 1 in the backfield. And that means that in a 2-by-2 formation, or even in a 1-by-3 where they have, 2 inside guys on one side, that you may see some big slot from a wide receiver this year. I just don't expect it to be anything primary that the Ravens do.
Yeah, no. Ken, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Before we wrap up, do you want to let everybody know where they can find your podcast, your social medias, or where they can listen to? I'd personally love listening to your show and the guests that you have on, the insight and knowledge that you have for the game.
I appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Anytime, Thomas and Nathan, by the way, if you want me on again. But at Film Study Ravens, as you can see at the bottom of your screen, is my handle on Twitter. The website is filmstudybaltimore.com. On YouTube, it's Film Study Baltimore Ravens Talk. Is the podcast where you can find the podcast. You can also find it on your podcast platform, same search. Please like and subscribe if you're there. And we have a lot of thought experiments is what we try and do. And I'll challenge UK fans, if you have a topic you'd like to talk about on air, more than happy to have you on. I just had Mikey, Seb, and Chris from Scottish Ravens yesterday do a show, and they talked about one concern they had and then one change they wanted to see before the regular season. But I have an open mic, particularly this time of year, for bringing on guests who are passionate about football.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much. Ken, it's been an absolute pleasure as always. I hope you've enjoyed spending time with us as much as we have spending time with you. Nathan, it's always good to see you. That's it from us tonight. We'll be back on tomorrow. I think we are 8:45 tomorrow night with host of Locked On Ravens, Kevin Orsteiger. He's coming back on the show. He'll break down some more stuff for us, and that'll be the end of our back-to-back podcast for this week. Ken, thank you very much. We've been Ravens Across the Pond. I've been Thomas. He's been Nathan. Ken has joined us as a very special guest. We'll catch you on the next one.
Till next time.
Thanks for listening to Ravens Across the Pond. We'll see you next time.